Wigan versus Hull at the DW feels like a relegation decider. I think there's not going to be all too much in it between these two sides. I think it's going to be a very nervy one. There's not going to be all too much in it between these two sides. I think it's going to be a very nervy one. This league, man. Guys, welcome back to the channel. What I thought we'd do for today's video, as I thought it would be pretty topical, was to go through every Championship club's worst defeat of this decade. So what's been your most embarrassing, heaviest defeat of this last 10 years? Last night we saw Wigan putting 8 goals past Hull, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But to make Hull fans feel a little bit better, I think that every club's had their fair share of batterings over the years, haven't they? This video is just for a bit of fun, really, so if you do go in to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. Also, let me know down below what are your memories from this game or any others that you've been embarrassed by at the end of it. Without any further ado though, guys, let's jump into this one. Starting out with Barnsley, who were battered 6-0 by Charlton in April 2013. This one was a bit all over the place. David Flitcroft was the Barnsley manager at the time, and Charlton absolutely ran away with this one, but they probably weren't helped with the fact that Barnsley had 2 men sent off. Stephen Dawson and Tom Kennedy both got red cards in the second half, and that didn't help things. And Charlton absolutely ran riot in this one. Ricardo Fuller scoring the final goal. What a player he was. And what's probably most amazing out of this is that Barnsley weren't relegated this season. They went unbeaten for their final 4 matches after being taken apart by Charlton and survived by 1 point, finishing above Peterborough in 21st position. Luton's actually came from this season when they were battered 7-0 by Brentford. They'll be thankful for Wigan, really, that their result no longer is the heaviest defeat in the league this season. But 7-0, honestly, they gifted them the lead after 6 minutes when Mbeumo got on the score sheet, and then it is quite possibly some of the worst defending we've ever seen in the Championship from Luton this match. It was like Brentford were playing FIFA against someone who just doesn't know the controls. Brentford just absolutely carved them open, and to be fair to Luton, if there's one side in the league that can absolutely dominate you, it is Brentford going forward. Josh De Silva got a hat-trick in this one. And then we get on to Hull, and we have to talk about last night. What on earth was that, guys? 8-0 against Wigan. Hull fans, let me know down below what your thoughts were after this one. It was an absolute shambles. It was a spineless performance from this Hull squad. We have to give credit to Wigan, of course, because this was really a crunch match in their season. They went at it and they were relentless going forward as well. The worst thing is, it could have been more than 8. Like, they let off a little bit in the second half. If they really wanted to go in for it, this could have been ridiculous. I was on Twitter when the game was going on, and every time I refreshed my timeline, another goal was going in. It was ridiculous. And we spoke about bad defending in the Luton game, but this was just at another level, honestly. This was criminal, some of the stuff that Hull defenders were doing in this one. I think the worst thing about this though is the fact that Wigan had goal music, and every time there was like a 3-second delay for when the goal went in and then when Wigan played the music. Hull players are going to be waking up in cold sweats in the middle of the night having PTSD thinking about this song playing in the back of their heads. Honestly, it's just ridiculous. But speaking of Hull, Charlton's biggest defeat of the decade came at the hands of Hull City as they lost 6-0 back in January 2016. What a team Hull had back in the day, by the way. Abel Hernandez bagged a hat-trick in this one. Robert Snodgrass got on the score sheet, Mo Diarmi as well. In the end, Hull were promoted this season and Charlton were relegated. It was a dismal Charlton side, this one. Jose Riga was the Charlton manager at the time, and this game really was just Hull versus Stephen Henderson in net, because no outfield player covered themselves in glory in this one. Last season, Huddersfield got torn apart by Man City by 6-1 at the Etihad, being their heaviest defeat of the decade. To be fair to Huddersfield, if there's one side that can just absolutely annihilate you in English football, it is Man City. Aguero got a hat-trick in this one, and at least Huddersfield got a goal. Stankovic scored from a set-piece before half-time, but I mean, this is what happens when you play Ben Hamer in the Premier League, guys. The fact that this was only the second game of the season as well sort of set the tempo for the rest of the year for Huddersfield, who went on to finish rock bottom on only 16 points that year. For Middlesbrough, we're going back to the 09/10 season when they were beaten 5-0 by West Brom at home. Now, what makes this one worse is this was like a top of the table clash near the start of the season as well. It was first versus second, and West Brom just absolutely ripped open Middlesbrough. Gareth Southgate didn't last too much longer in the job after this result. I mean, the guy's come a long way from being beat 5-0 by West Brom to now being the England manager, hasn't he? But ultimately, Middlesbrough massively flopped this season. They went on to finish 11th. For Birmingham, we're going back to October 2014 when they were beaten 8-0 by Bournemouth at home. I want to know from any Birmingham fans that were at this game, did you stick it out till the end and stay for the full match, or what? Did you get to a certain point where you thought, you know what, I've had enough of this? Because I don't think I've ever left a match early, but I've never seen us lose 8-0. And if it got to 8, I think it would get to the point where I go, do you know what, I don't really see us getting back into this. Bournemouth were superb this year. It was the year they were promoted. Pugh got a hat-trick. Birmingham did have a man sent off after 7 minutes, and that wasn't going to help things, but once again, this was just a dismal performance. They didn't actually have a manager at the time. they'd recently parted company with Lee Clark, and after this result left them 23rd in the championship. But amazingly, after this, Guy Rowett came in and they finished 11th. What made things worse for Birmingham in that game as well was the fact that they missed a penalty as well, so literally nothing went for them. For Stoke's largest defeat, we're going back to the Etihad as Man City beat them by 7-2 back in October 2017. This was the time where we could sort of tell that Stoke's tenure in the Premier League was coming to an end, but what you'll find on this video is that Man City pop up quite a few times really. There's no real shame in being battered by Man City. And to be fair to Stoke, they did almost pull this one back. They got it back to 3-2 at one point, but then in the second half, Man City completely took over. De Bruyne was an absolute joke in this one. Leroy Sané was fantastic. Fernandinho scored an absolute belter. It was scintillating stuff. I mean, Stoke had like a passed it down Fletcher trying to man mark Kevin De Bruyne in this one. It wasn't going to end well. QPR were going back to last season when they were beaten 7-1 by West Brom. I remember covering this one on the Championship Roundup. Steve McLaren had recently been appointed, and this one was really early on into the season. QPR just had the worst start ever. I think they lost their first 4 matches. They were rock bottom of the league, and people were saying, we think that's the end for Steve McLaren here, because how's he going to turn this around? But somehow he managed to do that. He was eventually sacked at the end of the season, I must say, but after the 7-1, QPR were like the nailed-on favourites to go down. Like, they just couldn't defend. But they did manage to sort of turn things around. They finished 19th in the end. I mean, they just got ripped apart by Harvey Barnes, Dwight Gill, Jay Rodriguez in this one. Wigan's largest defeat came at White Hart Lane back in the 09/10 season as Spurs beat them by 9-1. Jermaine Defoe scoring 5 second-half goals in this one. He absolutely tore them apart. It was Defoe and Crouch up front, and oh my god, it was something else. I mean, Jermaine Defoe was like a prime R9 Ronaldo in this one. He wasn't missing anything. Chris Kirkland had the game to forget. Literally everything for Spurs went in. Wigan were on the receiving end of a couple of batterings this season. They lost 8-0 on the last day of the season against Chelsea as well. Sheffield Wednesday's biggest defeat came at the hands of Man City back in 2014 in the League Cup third round, 7-0 at the Etihad. Chris Kirkland was actually in net for this one as well, so he's had a couple of batterings throughout his career, hasn't he? I think the contrast in squads was pretty clear when the team sheets came out for this one. I mean, Sheffield Wednesday were lining up with Stevie May up front. Man City had Edin Dzeko. Reading's heaviest defeat came a couple of seasons ago, 7-1 at Carrow Road away at Norwich. It was a bit of a weird one that caught everyone off guard because by this point in the season, Reading had pretty much secured their place in the top 6. Norwich were just sort of hovering around mid-table. Alex Neil had recently been sacked and Alan Irvine took over for the rest of the season. It was an absolute masterclass from Alex Pritchard and Wes Hoolahan in this one. Norwich found themselves 4-0 up after 30 minutes and Reading never really recovered from then on. Blackburn's heaviest defeat came at the Emirates as they lost 7-1 to Arsenal back in February 2012. This was the year they were relegated to the Championship, and this was just a very toxic time in Blackburn's history really. Steve Keane was manager. There was tensions between the fans, the board, the management staff. It wasn't a good time for Blackburn, but Arsenal absolutely tore them apart in this one. Van Persie got a hat-trick. Pedersen did get one back for Blackburn, but they were torn apart in that one. Bristol City's largest defeat came back in the 09/10 season at the hands of Cardiff. I mean, to lose 6-0 is bad enough, but for it to happen in the derby, it makes it all the more worse, doesn't it? Dean Gerkin, the Bristol City goalkeeper, had an evening to forget in this one. He did drop a couple of clangers for the Cardiff goals. Ross McCormack ran the show. He got a brace as well as Michael Chopra. Cardiff got all the way to the playoff final that year, but lost out to Blackpool. For Bristol City, though, that was a game to forget. Derby's largest defeat also came at the hands of Cardiff City as they beat them by 6-1 in the same season. This Cardiff squad was doing absolute bits. They were scoring for fun, weren't they? Michael Chopra scoring 4 goals in this one. Rob Hulse did get a consolation goal back for Derby, but Cardiff were way out of sight. For Millwall, we go back to January 2012 as they were beaten at the Den 6-0 by Birmingham. They had 2 men sent off in this one. Shane Lowry sent off in the first half and then Alan Dunn in the second. They were reduced to 9 men and Birmingham more than took advantage. Up until that point where they had both those sent off, they were only losing 1-0, and then Birmingham just went to town and put 5 past them in the second half. For North End, we're going to Newcastle in 2016 as they beat us by 6-0 in the League Cup. We played them 3 times this season. They beat us all 3 times with an aggregate score of 12-2. To be honest, I don't know what we were expecting from this one with the lineup we went for. We started with Anders Lindegaard in net, who was about as useful for North End as a chocolate teapot. Liam Grimshaw, who just didn't look like a professional footballer. Ben Pringle, Owen Doyle. It was a disaster. Alan Brown got sent off early on, and then Newcastle just absolutely ran through us. It was awful. Mitrovic bagged a brace against us as he normally does. What's worse is we had to play them again a couple of days later in the league, and they beat us again. Mitrovic scored another brace, and then they beat us 4-1 again later on this season. Honestly, I don't enjoy playing Newcastle. For Swansea, we're going back to the Etihad. I think it's the 4th time that Man City have appeared on this video, but they beat Swansea by 5-0. Back in 2018, Man City had already won the league by this point. Swansea did go on to get relegated this year. Carlos Carvajal, it was the year where he came in halfway through the season. They did improve under him, but he couldn't keep them up in the end. And I mean, like I said before, there's no shame in losing to Man City, but they absolutely dominated this game. Swansea having just 17% possession and 1 shot on target in this one, compared to Man City, who were just mental. For Cardiff, we're only going back to January, as QPR beat them by 6-1. This result sort of came out of nowhere. It was back when QPR were scoring goals for fun. Nahki Wells got a hat-trick in this one. Asai Samuel bagged a brace, and Eze got one as well. Will Vaulks got one late on to salvage some sort of respect for Cardiff, but it's sort of the only blip on Neil Harris's CV at Cardiff so far, because I think he's come in and obviously he's done fantastic with them. For them to be in the top 6, it was another win last night for them as well. On the whole, they've kept things ridiculously tight at the back so far this season, but this one, like I say, was the only real blip where they conceded 6 against QPR out of nowhere. For Nottingham Forest, I'm sorry Forest fans, I have to remind you of this one. We're going back to March 2014 when Derby came out as 5-0 victors in this one. I mean, that's hard to live down, isn't it? It was at a point in the season as well where Forest was so close to going into the top 6. Had they won this one, they would have actually gone into the top 6, but this just sent them down a spiral of really bad momentum, and for their final 9 matches of the season, they only won 2 more matches after this one, and ultimately finished the season 11th. I mean, Derby was something else. Craig Bryson got a hat-trick, Johnny Russell scored an absolute screamer. To be fair to Forest though, I think that it shows how far they've come in the last like 5 or 6 years. If you compare their squad now to what they've got these days, I think they're definitely gone in the right direction. With Fulham, we're going back to December 2013. They were beaten 6-0 by Hull away from home. I think we all sort of recognised that Fulham were on their way out of the Premier League. I mean, when they were picking up results like this, they were only going to go in one direction. Rennie Mullenstein was in charge for a really short period of this season. He was in charge for this one, and it was an absolute disaster class. One of the worst Premier League performances we've ever seen, really. It was also the game where Tom Huddleston had finally broken his goal drought and got to cut his hair. Hull were in complete control, and obviously Fulham went on to get relegated that year. For Brentford, we're going to December 2016 where Norwich beat them by 5-0 at Carrow Road. This Brentford squad has come a long way since then, obviously playing some of the best football we're seeing in the Championship at the moment against my side North End tonight, but this one was shocking. Dean Smith, in charge at the time, actually said that it's his worst performance that he's ever had as a manager. Alex Neil was in charge at Norwich at the time, and they absolutely tore them apart. Like, as soon as like the 2nd or 3rd went in, Brentford just gave up, really. And like I say, since then Brentford have come a long way. For West Brom, we're going back to 2010 as Chelsea beat them by 6-0. This was actually on the first day of the season, and West Brom had just been promoted back up to the Premier League. Could you imagine the confidence knock that would be? Your first game back in the big time is against Chelsea, and they put 6 past you on the opening day. I mean, you talk about a tough start, but that is something else. They were behind after 6 minutes thanks to Malouda. Drogba then scored a hat-trick. Lampard got another. Chelsea back in the day were just an absolute beast though, weren't they, with this team? Although, to be fair to the West Brom, they didn't let that result hang over them for the rest of the season, as they went on to have a really good finish and went on to finish 11th in the end. And then finishing today off with Leeds United. Back in January 2014, they were beaten 6-0 by Sheffield Wednesday at Hillsborough. I mean, if that doesn't show how far Leeds have come, I don't know what will, really. Brian McDermott was in charge at the time, and their squad then compared to now, like I say, Leeds have come a long way. Wednesday back then still has a few familiar faces knocking around. New Hughes scored in this one, obviously still at Wednesday these days. Connor Wickham scored as well, who's now back out on loan at Wednesday. But this was like the ultimate humiliation for Leeds. Matt Smith was sent off early on in the second half, and then after that, Wednesday just completely took over this one. Brian McDermott came out after the game and said it was humiliating and that it's a terrible time for Leeds United, the supporters and us. I mean, how times have changed. But guys, there you have it. That will wrap it up for today's video. So there was every Championship club and what was their most humiliating, heaviest defeat of the last 10 years. Let me know in the comments down below what are your memories from these games, and also, do you have any others at the back of your head where you thought, God, that was an embarrassing one? But other than that, guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. So if you did go to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. Like I say, today's video was just for a bit of a laugh, really. If you are new around here, make sure to subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.